Nice studio, Keith.
Yeah, well, we've been here, what, a month? So,
And you are technically up and running.
Oh, technically up and running completely, yeah, it's great. It's and it's warm. The other place was an industrial unit, it was bloody cold. So, this is warm and it's got a bit of daylight seeping in, which is a bonus.
Because you moved studios before, didn't you? Or was this a space that you had as an
No, I had the studio's storage space.
Right.
Because we were doing so many room sets, we had so many props. We just outgrew the original studio, so we did a bit of a deal with the landlord on the site, and they give us this space. But I preferred this space. It's more industrial. It's got a lot more character. It's warmer. It's got daylight. It's a bit smaller than the other space. So when we decided to just have one space, this was favoured. But it's taken us a month and a lot of pain to move out.
So for people who aren't aware, just describe the type of work that you do in the studio space.
It's really all sorts of commercial advertising photography. So it's we do a lot of still life. I'm doing some jewellery at the moment. It's quite a big thing for us. We were doing a lot of room sets. A lot of room sets, and that was a big part of my business. We're doing fewer now. We do people, so we do people, in studio on location. But I would have thought probably 70% of my business is studio based, if not more, maybe 80%. So yeah, it's and you've got to, as your business circumstances change, you've got to change to suit. And the room sets we were doing, the client was looking at going more onto location and that sort of stuff. So we really decided to, let's bite the bullet and get rid of all the props, get rid of all the stuff, because we kept so many props because we did so much of it. We didn't need any more, so off they had to go.
Yeah,
in the skip on eBay.
The periphery of your floor space
was
pretty packed, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And that's what happens. You buy a lot of stuff. You hire a lot of stuff. That's fine. That all goes back. You borrow some stuff, but the stuff you buy, it's still got value, isn't it? So you tend to store it because it'll come in handy, and it does, especially on these late nights when you're there needing one or two little props just to finish the shot, rather than send the stylist out, or wait till the morning till the stylist is back in and you lose another couple of hours. You tend to sort of push on and use what you've got. And that also makes the job more viable, in terms of cost, because the more props you keep, the more, viable for us, viable for the client. So, props are a big cost of a room set. So the more we held on to, the more, the cheaper we could do it for, and the more money we made on the job as well. Because there was always a set fee for props. So you've got this tension going on. So you've got a certain amount of fee that the client has agreed to pay for props, and that's for the service of supplying props. You don't have to buy props at that value, So you have to buy props that are right for the job, and sometimes you go over budget. But sometimes you manage to get away with buying props that are still right for the job and the budget, and you make some money. And it's a bit of a balance and act you play, But keeping props as part of that, hence the bigger studio, but it just got too big, it fell over in the end. Too much stuff.
But I think anyone looking at the images on your website, some of the portfolios there, the one thing I'd probably say is the lighting's very tight. Yeah.
Tight.
You're very good at your lighting. Well, I suppose is that the mark of a good studio photographer?
Yeah, I think lighting's a mark of a good photographer, isn't it? A big bugbear of mine is seeing images poorly lit. Obviously in my sort of side, in the studio sort of side, because you're creating everything from scratch. You start for the black studio and you light it, and so it is all down to you, isn't it? If it's badly lit, then it's your fault, and if it's well lit, then good. It's different if you shoot on location, because that's a totally different animal. You've got to deal with what you've been given. So, but I still think that lighting is on location. I see some beautiful lighting, beautiful use of natural light, but also really good manipulation of the natural light. With artificial light to balance it out. It's all about lighting, I think. Lighting, composition, just the basics. And I don't think that's taught enough or I don't think people understand it enough. It's an essential skill, throughout photography.
You do location work. You will go out with the
Oh God,
studio
yeah.
space. So how well equipped do you go in terms of taking your tight lighting with you?
Ridiculous to take all the lighting with me. So we go out with it depends, but we go out with mostly with flash. So you've got 3 or 4 big 3,200 joule flash packs, and about 10 heads. No, we might only use 1 or 2 just to fill, but we just go for every eventuality, and then we might take a little set of DDOs, little tungsten DDOs, to put little pops in some places. So yeah, I think I do go over equipped, and but I think that's just part of. It's like a comfort blanket. I know when I get there, I'm prepared for anything, and you trade on producing high quality images wherever, whenever, and so you need to make gear really with you. It's no good saying I wish I'd brought that. Bring it. Doesn't matter if it stays in the boot of your car, just bring it.
Do you ever work just solely in natural light?
Oh yeah, a lot. Yeah. I prefer to do that. If I'm shooting, like for example, we've got one client, we shoot office furniture for them, on location. So we hire big office spaces, or sort of funky studio spaces, or whatever it is, all over the place. And we really endeavour to shoot all of that with natural light. We'll take some reflectors with us and some stuff just to give some soft fill, and we'll have our full kit of flash there. But the only time we use the flash really is to bounce off an opposing wall, just to fill in the shadows. And again, we do that very, very subtly. And the other thing is, shooting with available light on digital is a completely different thing from shooting with available light on film, because in post you've got so much more latitude, haven't you? In filling shadows, to some extent you can get away with filling shadows in your raw processor, So but you tend not to rely on that. We try to get it right in camera, and of course we're shooting tethered into the raw processor anyway, so you see what you get on the screen. So and I think that's a great way of working. Clients love that.
Do you look forward to the future with a little trepidation, because lots of, especially IKEA now, are doing everything on the computer. They're not even using photographers to photograph anymore.
Yeah,
and everything's being built on a computer.
Yeah, I mean we're a trepidation. I think you've got to go with that change of trend, haven't you? At the moment, we're taking the office furniture. We just shot a load of really high-end chairs and bits and bobs, which were all put into a rendered environment. So what they find is, often what people find is that the renders, and this is the clients as well as the designers, and right across the board, they find that the renders of the backgrounds are great, sometimes too perfect. They need to dirty them up a bit, but the products really don't look great rendered. They still haven't got that. They just look a bit too unreal. So they still, they're still having them photographed, and it's not, it's not cheaper for them to do that. Obviously, it's more expensive, but they still prefer to photograph the products. So I don't know where that'll go, but I'm quite happy to go with it. As far as I'm not going to learn rendering software, and I'm not going to get into that side of it. But there is a part of it. But like the whole thing of studio photography is a rapidly contracting market anyway, for a million different reasons. And that's just one of the pressures.
What do you think the main pressure is then?
I think there's a lot of there are lower budgets, definitely, for this sort of thing. There's a lot of cheap, and this is expensive. This is the expensive end of photography, I suppose.
Yes.
This is because you've got a studio and the lighting and the whole thing to carry, and assistants and stylists and models, and it's the higher end of the cost structure. And I think there's a lot of photographers out there without studios, with a bag of Nikons or whatever, who can do things much, much cheaper. And so there's a temptation for clients to go, do we really need to do that in the studio? Can we do it on location? Can we cut the cost there? And they do. So that's another pressure. I think the whole industry is changing. You know, I'm not sure how eventually it'll be a much smaller niche provider. You know, studio photographers will be of a much smaller niche rather than, you know, I can see, I've been in it for quite some years. Now, over the years I've been in it, there were a lot of studios. Now there are, you know, half as many studios at most, probably a third of the studios in South Wales, for example, and that's replicated around the country, you know.
Do you have time for your own photography?
Not as much as I'd like to do. No, I'm because I'm not doing so much of the room sets. My plan for this year is to do that. I've been doing a bit of soul searching and been going, right, okay, I need to do more of my own stuff. Because in fact, you know, just because I'm a pretty commercial animal, you know, I work for money, that's great. But also your own photography tends to feed into your work, and people, especially clients, love to see your own stuff and how they can use that. New ideas, new approaches, and that often happens. I shoot something for myself, I'll stick it on the website, or I'll show someone, a client in the studio, they're brilliant, we can use that for this next project, whatever. That happens, you know, that happens as much as I can shoot stuff. And so, yeah, I should do more, and I don't do half enough.
Right. And when you are doing your own stuff, what do you like to shoot? Do you have... well, that's a silly question, and too open-ended perhaps, but do you... is your involvement with people?
I love shooting people, yeah.
And what about landscape? Do you like to walk the landscape? Or?
Strangely enough, I find myself walking the landscape, shooting the detail. So I've got a whole set of pictures. I was in Spain in the summer, just on holiday, and I was out in the campo, you know, wandering about. But I didn't really want to shoot the wide stuff. I ended up shooting a whole series of, you know, dying plants and stuff. So it's almost like the still life mentality coming back, you know, and you're actually shooting very tight. And I always get drawn into that. I do shoot landscapes, but I haven't got the patience for it really, and I don't want to sit there waiting for the sun.
It's really interesting, that correlation between the work you're doing in the studio and doing work in the field.
Yeah.
That you like to do that tight stuff.
Yeah.
What's the fascination then in that tight stuff?
I think it's all about form, isn't it, and light. You know, like, you know, without being too pretentious about it, you know, you see these things, and they're, you know, whether they're little, you know, whether they're little cacti or whether these. I shot a lot of plants that have been shriveled by the sun, you know, or been burnt to nothing by the sun, and they were all beautiful little structures and shapes. And of course, with the early morning light, you know, coming through them, they were absolutely beautiful things. When you sort of isolated them from their backgrounds, they're extraordinary things, you know. And I find that more interesting than seeing the wide escape, you know. And I think the wide escape needs a different mindset to mine. You know, if you're going to shoot wider landscapes, you know, coming back to the lighting, you have to be willing to get up, crack a dawn, waiting for that really great moment, light, or being there at the end of the day. And it's all about finding a place and waiting. I just haven't got that. I haven't got that type of patience. I can endlessly shoot something in fine detail, and I'll go, you know, to the nth degree to get something right in the studio or out when I'm shooting on you know, for myself. But I haven't got the patience to sit there and wait, and no, not for me.
So if you are out walking, or you're in Spain on your belly, looking at these
Yeah.
space,
It was just like that, yeah.
does the studio photography, and you kick in and you reach for a piece of paper as a reflector just to kick that a little bit? Like
Oh, that's a terrible ambition, isn't it?
you have you?
I have, yeah. I have done just that, yeah.
It's just in you.
I'd never thought about it. I've just, you know, you say about reaching for a bit of paper, I've done exactly that. Oh, I just need a bit of fill there. It's just terrible, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, you know, you start talk about lighting, and, you know, you see something and you just kick in, don't you? You just say, no, that could just do that, you know, that shadow just a little bit down for me. And yeah, you can do a lot in the software, but actually it's quite nice to get it right. And perhaps that's, you know, again, perhaps I'm a dinosaur, you know, perhaps I want to get it too right in camera. But
Is that a bad thing?
No, I'm not sure if it is or not. I mean, I don't know.
The really funny thing is, we were talking about dinosaurs with Tim, a previous interview
Right, yeah.
we did, and we were talking about the dinosaur aspect of us as sort of middle-aged photographers and older photographers.
Yes.
And I suppose, but that dinosaur element is quite important, I think, in some respects. It has a lot of value.
I think it has got a lot of value. I mean, banging on about it, it is a thing that, we've learned a lot of technique and we have a lot of skill to pass on, but nobody seems to want to know it.
Do you believe them?
I do. God, yeah, I do. I think we've got massive amount of skill and knowledge that doesn't necessarily get passed on. I mean, the system has always been that you take on an assistant who washes the dishes and sweeps the floor, but and gets paid a pittance. But they're the people who are around to pick up any sort of knowledge you've got to impart. So,
but they've got to want to learn.
They've got to want to learn. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've had assistants who just turn up, and don't engage, and they don't last very long. You need people who come in and they are interested in what you're doing. And interested in producing images. Now you do it, even if they don't want to do what you do, which I completely understand. They still need to, there's still a lot they can learn throughout. Whether it's just constructing an image or composition or lighting or on the technical side. Shooting in digital shooting in RAW and why you're shooting in RAW and how this works and why it's important your monitor's balanced and God knows what. There are a million things, techniques in retouching, especially in image grading.
That craft side of it.
Yeah, I think that's what I've had to learn since I've come back into photography. Is I left photography in the 90s when it was film, and I came back into it 10 years later or whatever when it was digital, and so I'd always kept a Nikon DSLR with me and whatever, but I didn't really get engaged in the digital thing till I got back into photography. Didn't really understand the whole RAW thing and why. And
the gap then, how important was the gap before you came back to photography? How influential was what you were doing? I mean, you started as a photographer?
Yeah, I started as a photographer, and I was in photography for 15 years or something, 12, 15 years. And then I went into design, and so I worked for a company for 5 years, ran my own company for 5 years. I was in design for 10 years. And yeah, I mean, when I came back into photography, I'm then working for people that I had a lot more empathy with.
So, but what was the motivation to go back?
Oh, to go back, I think I really missed it. I think I always thought of myself as a photographer. So, what people say, what does it say in your passport? Well, I would have always put photographer. Even after 10 years in design, I thought of myself as a photographer, working like a usurper, sort of working in design. I did a bit of art direction, and I was always involved in the creative side of it, but I did a lot of account management as well. And, those are things, those are bits of knowledge you gain. I wouldn't have gained other,
and
bits of experience I've gained.
So, and they influenced, obviously, the way you work now as a commercial photographer.
Of course, I bet they're bound to, yes. Because, you definitely have more empathy with art directors, because the pressures they're under. In the past, before I worked in design, an art director would come to the studio and they'd want something, and you'd be thinking, what an arse, you don't know what he's talking about. And actually, I think often the art directors are under a massive amount of pressure, both from their peers, in the design company or other designers, and mostly from clients who want a particular thing, and they have to try and interpret the client's brief. And I think that's not an easy task, and good art directors do it really well, and there aren't many good ones about them, I'm afraid. But now when people come here, I sort of try to get deeper into what they want. They'll ask for something and say, right, okay, start from the beginning, where what's the client after here, because just to get the most out of every job. So it's given me a lot of insight like that.
So that piece of white paper again. So when you were doing the art direction side and perhaps commissioning other photographers on projects you were working, were you reaching for the camera out of frustration sometimes, or
no?
How did you find that having to stand back?
How did I find it? Yeah, slightly frustrating. I had my assistant, my long-time assistant, took over the studio when I left, so I used him, and another guy I used to work with quite a lot, who'd worked with me for me in the past. So I used those as photographers generally. And the one guy who's my assistant, he took a couple of years to get up to speed, So when I'd go there, he would be faffing about taking forever to do something that was fairly simple, and I would sort of go, right, let's do it like this. And we'd already had that relationship, So he could see what was happening, so he just stood back and let me carry on for a bit. But after a couple of years, he became a very, very talented photographer. He was a very talented photographer, but technically he became better. His confidence levels soared, And by the end, he was a really, really good guy, which I was quite proud of because he'd learned it all with me because he'd never worked in a studio before. But he was very, very good until sadly sort of passed away. So he was that was okay. But I had lots of different stuff. I was in London working on a shoot with a photographer called Johnny Boylan, who's a lovely guy, and we were halfway through the shoot, and I was saying, look, I think what we need to do here, if you just do a bit of flash and blur on this and blah blah blah, and I started talking, and he stopped and he was looking at me sort of strangely. And then a couple of things came up during the day when I suggested different things. And then at dinner that night, we were chatting and he said, so what did you do before this? And I owned up, saying, I was a photographer. He said, bastard. I can't believe it. He said, I knew. I said, you were either really, really experienced art director or you were a photographer. And I was saying to my assistant, there's something up here, something fishy, he knows too much. So that was quite funny.
But I guess like in any genre of professional photography, those things about, in business in general, isn't it? Relationships absolutely matter. But what you were saying earlier with the pressures on studio photography now in terms of budgets and what have you, is there a loyalty, do you think, with clients to try and want to stick with someone they can gel with, that they know they can talk to quite freely, they'll get the job done?
Yeah, I think there is. I think there's trust and a loyalty, with 90% of the people you work with, you build up relationships and you have these long-term relationships, and they'll trust. They know what you do, they know exactly what you do, and they know that they can. They'll leave with the shot, and the client will be happy. And that's sort of the danger. There is you become the safe guy, that you become the guy that people go to, that they know you're reliable, you're not going to mess up, but it might not be the most creative answer because it's not pushing the boundaries. And so there's a bit of a problem there where you don't want to be the ultimate safe guy. You do want to push, but you do want that shoot to work. You want that client to, I'm talking about the intermediate client, the designer or the advertising agency, whatever. You want those to go away with something that their client will be completely happy with and blown away with. And often it doesn't need that much to do that. When clients see their stuff beautifully lit and lovely, they're knocked out. They've never seen it like that, so they're really happy. But you can. There's a big thing about whether there's always a big debate, especially in the States. In my sort of photography, whether you go to the safe guy or whether you go to the young up and coming guy who might get you the brilliant picture that would be award winning or whatever, but we'll only do that one time out of 10. The other 10 below par and a bit crap. So
playing the percentages, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think again that comes of the cost. If we're doing a room set, and the cost of that room set is $6,000 or something, well, people quite like that to be right, wouldn't they? It's a lot of money to spend on a photograph, and so they're going to go to people that they can trust to come up with it, because it's not just building the room set and lighting it, whatever. You know, the styling, the whole package needs to sell that product, and they tend to, want to make sure that they get value for money, sell a product, and so you do build relationships on that sort of, a percentage basis, definitely. And I think the better relationships are the personal relationships you make, where you can talk to people, most of the art directors I work with who I've got very good relationships with, they will talk to me about a project when it's in the studio being discussed amongst, as a creative is evolving. And that's the best part. That's the best bit of the job. When somebody gives you a call and says, "Look, can you pop over and have a look at this? What do you think of this? How are we going to shoot this? What do you reckon?" And that's the best part. And then you build up really good relationships with people like that, where they.
Is being Cardiff-based being a disadvantage to you?
It's got its specific problems. We've got very low budgets in Cardiff compared to most cities. The day rates are fairly low for what we do. Not a lot of clients with a lot of money, just one or two really. So that's a disadvantage. You've also got the fact that you have to be to make a living, to make a decent living out of photography. You can't be a specialist. In studio terms, it's very difficult just to be. Actually, it can't be. It's very difficult to be a specialist. So, whereas in London, you can be a car photographer. And these genres don't exist outside of London anyway, really. But you could be a car photographer. Not only could you be a car photographer, you could be a sports car photographer. You're good at that, Or instead of being a food photographer, you can be an ice cream photographer. The real specialist sort of stuff. Well, I found anyway that to make a living in Cardiff, you have to be able to do everything. So
what was the decision then? I mean, it would seem. Are you jealous of the fact that you could do perhaps more exciting work if you were a London-based photographer?
No, I mean, I worked in London when I left, our college, and I spent a couple of years there, and it was great. I learned a lot from brilliant photographers. But the bits that you see, the exciting bits that you see, the stuff that wins awards, the stuff that that's really the tip of the iceberg. That it really is the top couple of percent. The rest of it is the stuff I do. There's no real difference. So I don't get to do that top bit ever. So that ambition, never going to be realised. But I got after working in London for a while, I got to realise that most of the stuff was workaday stuff, and the glamorous bits, there's not a lot of them.
So did you start off as an assistant?
Yes, yeah.
So you were brushing the floors and making the coffee then?
Oh God, yeah, it was good at brushing floors. Yeah, really good. Sweeping floors is a speciality. Not sure the coffee was that good, but processing film. So you spend a long time in the darkroom processing. Whether it was an E6 line or a black and white or whatever. In London, most of it went out to labs anyway. But in terms of the E6, but the black and white was all done in house, and the printing obviously was done in house. So you had to do all of that sort of stuff. But I was lucky. I freelanced and I worked in various studios, and I worked with some great people, and you just learn so much.
So who stands out in that period of your time? Who had a big influence on you as a young photographer?
There's a guy called Bryce Atwell, who's a New Zealander food photographer, and this is going back some time. There's a guy called Robert Golden, who was, if you research him, he changed the face of food photography in the UK. I didn't meet him, but he was food photography was a very American, had a very American look with big soft light and deep shadows, and when you look at it, it looks very 50s now. It looks very old and whatever. And Robert Golden brought this sort of sunlight infused, sort of softly lit.
More dynamic.
Much more dynamic, and but it was a particular style of lighting, all done in studio, but it looked like it was shot in, on on a table in a French dining room or something like that, with light streaming across it. And then I worked with a guy called Bryce Atwell, who was the next generation of that style. And he took it on to new levels. He was brilliant. And I only freelanced for him a few times, but he was fantastic. And at the same time, I was working for a guy called Melvin Gray, who was the more standard food photographer. And so the contrast was great, And, Bryce was doing this really exciting and interesting sort of stuff that was pushing the boundaries. And Melvin was, the other side. He was a plodder, he was a lovely guy and all this sort of stuff, but he was just doing fairly straightforward stuff, regurgitating what he'd done for the last 20 years, So he was good. I worked for a lot of interesting people. Adrian Flowers was an interesting guy I worked for. Did loads of the Benson Hedges ads back in the 48 posters. That was extraordinary. He was a complete lunatic, but great,
You've reached a certain stage with your photography. Have you got any ambitions within the field that you work in?
No, and no real ambitions in the field I work in. I've got personal ambitions.
Oh, what are those then?
I think I need to do more personal sort of stuff, particularly with people and in studio. I'm quite sure, I'm ready to lay that out completely. But there's pictures I want to take that I haven't taken. There's projects I want to do that I haven't done, but they are really personal things.
Can you? What are one of those projects?
It's just it's all people based. It's all the things I'm talking about at the moment. I really like photographing, whether it's faces or bodies or human form generally. It's just we're going back to the sort of the thing we were talking about when I was out in the Campo in Spain, photographing things as beautiful objects. And I find human faces like that. I love shooting people's faces and care where they are. Really interesting, and lighting them and getting something out of them, expressions and whatever. And bodies the same. I don't do a lot of that sort of stuff, but I really enjoy doing it, whether it's fashion or nudes or whatever it is. Quite like doing that sort of stuff, which I haven't done much of, And it's a shame, I want to do much more of that sort of stuff. And that's just for personal fulfillment, It's just to have something at the end. I think, I like that.
Because you have some examples on the site, and I know you maybe do some beauty stuff or helping out local hairdressers or young models up and coming and what have you. Is that? Do you get the time that you would like to have on that? Or is that what you're describing?
I don't. I have to make the time.
More of that. Yeah.
I have to make the time, and
because again, that lighting is very tight, but some of that stuff is absolutely cracking.
The lighting is, that's it, isn't it? And that's what I can bring to it. I've got a lot of experience with that and a lot of patience to get it right. I'd like to shoot some stuff that's looser. I'd like to shoot some stuff that's much more accidental, because my stuff is tight, because again I'm always shooting to a brief, and it needs to be right and gorgeous and beautiful and tick all those boxes. But I'd like to shoot stuff that's much more looser, where you're leaving a lot more room for error and the happy accident. And I think that's a great way forward, in your personal work.
So would that be for you, with a studio space and the lighting that you have, that investment? Would that be that analogy of like street photography, of find the spot, find the scene, find the light, and then wait for the right thing? Would you put someone on a seat or wait to see what happens there? Is that what you're describing?
No, I think what I'm talking about. I mean, I'm sure it's a similar thing, but what I'm talking about is whereas I'm my lighting is tight. It is on a particular point in space and time. You sit there or stand there and do this, and I will light you doing it. I think I used to love, if you go back to the 80s and 90s, there's a guy called Arthur Elgort, who's a New York photographer, who did some beautiful fashion stuff in a daylight studio. And you always got the sense that, he'd got the one frame out of a roll of film that worked, whereas I don't do that. All my frames look great. If I like them, they all look great. That's not the problem. The problem is getting the right expression and the right look and stuff like that. Well, I'd like to do it with a different type of tungsten light rather than flash again, where there's a lot more light bouncing around, and you take there's a lot more movement, a lot more freedom going on, and something happens that you don't expect to happen. A bit of light catches a bit of this, and get the right expression. It's a much more fluid sort of thing. And I want to experiment in some of that as well in studio. And that's a fun thing to do. You know, if you get the right people in place, the right models, and the right sort of bit of light, and the right styling, I think is important as well. And then just have fun and spend a day having fun and see what happens. And I don't do that enough. But that is a great way of getting really interesting images, which are better, you know, ultimately, than the tight ones I shoot for a living. Yeah. There's always been a problem with getting work to come to Wales from outside. It's a real problem, you know, because the first thing you think of, you know, if you're based in Cardiff, then Bristol is 40 minutes away, whatever it is. And you go to the Bristol agencies, and they're really reluctant to send work over the bridge. You know, no matter what you offer, there's a very there is some sort of problem there, and we've tried it, and I know other people have tried it pretty unsuccessfully, and yet, you know, like I'm working for a company in, you know, shooting today. I'm shooting for a company in Surrey, but that's because I've got a Welsh contact. You know, it just happened to be that, you know, one of the guys who's quite senior in the company is from the same town as me, and met through a mutual friend, and so it's that sort of contact way in, rather than somebody using you because you're good at that particular thing.
You must be a pretty efficient bloke, because your workflow, obviously, and because you have many masters in many respects.
Oh, yeah, sure.
You know, and ultimately the client at the far end is going to look at your work, and whatever you may have done or relationship you may have had with an art director, they may go, well, we're not that keen, or,
yeah.
Or they may want to change. So, but workflow-wise, how do you farm work out, or or are you that particular that you want to do everything yourself?
No, I do everything myself apart from clipping paths. We farm clipping paths out. We used to do them ourselves, but, you know, there's no real point.
For those that don't know what that is.
All right, clipping path. Okay, if you photograph an object, and the designer wants to take it into a design package in design or something, and use it as a cutout, as just an object floating in space, so they can put it over text or over backgrounds they create or whatever, you need to make a clipping path, and that's basically in Photoshop with a pen tool drawing a line around it. But it's not quite as simple as it might sound, and they're just time consuming. They're ball breaking sort of thing to do, so we tend to farm that out. But all the retouching I do in house. I've tried freelance retouchers, I've tried all sorts of things, sometimes use an assistant to do it, but I'm sort of leaning over their shoulder most of the time and whatever. So yeah, there's a bit of control freakery in that. But, you know, it is about keeping that standard as you want it, you know.
Do we have in Wales, just what you're describing there, that support network of clipping paths and people good at that, people good at retouching? Do we have those kind of support, other niche areas in supporting photography?
No, the industry's too small in South Wales. I'm talking now specifically for support for my type of commercial photography. So I don't know a commercial retoucher who can work to the standards we need in South Wales. You know, I might not have looked hard enough, but I certainly don't know anyone. I think there's a guy in Chepstow who is reasonable, but I really don't know anybody. But not only that, we don't have models and stylists and, you know, makeup artists who really can work to the level that we need.
In photography? In photography,
yeah.
Because the irony there is we're upping the skills base around TV and drama and what have you.
Yes, yeah.
With the BBC.
But not in photography, no. I mean, you know, it's just straightforward commercial thing, you know. For models, for example, models get better with experience, you know, so they need to be shooting a lot. And of course, it just doesn't happen. It's just not the work in Cardiff or in South Wales or wherever. In Wales, I always thought. And in a lot of other places, you know. So they all tend to gravitate to, you know, in the south, obviously it's London, in the north, Manchester. And so there are plenty of great models in Manchester, plenty of great models in London. But it's the work follows the models then. And so the stylists go there. So, for example, my own brother is a hairdresser, and he does he enters the British Hairdressing Awards every year. And, for that you'll get 8 models perhaps on a day shoot or 2-day shoot, whatever. And, we'll have 2 hairdressers, 2 makeup artists and 2 stylists, and it's quite a big production. And we simply I can't do it for him because we can't get the models here economically. So even if we were to get some fashion models down who were sort of new faces, so the younger, sort of less experienced models from some of the big agencies, the cost of getting them down here for 2 days, putting them up with the transport, the whole thing, is prohibitive. It's cheaper to go and hire a studio in London and work up there, and you get makeup artists who are more experienced. They work faster. All these things make a massive difference to a shoot, rather than the whole shoot going dead because you're waiting for makeup and whatever. And then stylists who've got great contacts and can pull rabbits out of hats really in London. We don't have that infrastructure here. Certainly, and no retouchers and no assistants, no freelance assistant regime. It's all of that stuff. You have to become self-sufficient really, and have to rely on a very small band of contacts to get you by. So I've got a few models who are my go-to models. When I need a good model who's the fashion model, I've got 2 or 3 I can call on. That's it. And but because budgets just don't take it. If somebody's got a couple of grand for a model, brilliant, make a phone call, we get them down from London for the day, it's fine. But most clients in Wales don't have that level of budget.
Have you been following what Amazon has been doing in New York and more recently in London, buying big studio spaces to shoot fashion, just solely fashion?
No, I've heard about it. I haven't really followed it. No,
It's something like 40,000 square feet of studio space.
Yeah, but in New York, isn't it?
Yeah, but now in London, some old railway arches.
Oh right, well,
the Magic Roundabout area. I think.
Yeah, you can do all of this, but it will just be in the cities because you've got the people. You've got the photographers, people with ambition as well, people who want to get on, people who want to do the stuff. And they sort of gravitate towards London,
Do you think Wales is catering for that commercial side of photography in terms of up-and-coming photographers?
No.
Teaching, education?
Self-taught? No, I don't see it at all. I don't see, I really fear for that sort of side of it. There are a lot of people, whether they're students who whether they're undergraduates or whatever, or whether they're just people with cameras who do a lot of sort of outdoor photography, location photography, whatever it is, and some of them are terrifically talented, whether it's in portraiture or landscape or whatever, and there's a commercial side to that obviously, but coming back to sort of what I do, the more advertising based sort of commercial studio, that type of stuff, I don't know anyone who's up and coming. I don't know a young photographer I could be wrong here, but I don't know any young photographer who is studio based and making waves really.
So would the whole cost of setting up a studio and having the right kind of gear and all the bits that go with the studio, do you think that really is the prohibitive thing?
It's got to be a big hurdle, isn't it?
Yes.
Again, there's a bit of the costs. We shoot on medium format cameras, so the costs are horrible. The camera's 20 grand, so it's a lot of money to set up. But you don't need to do that. There are perfectly good DSLRs out there which will get you by and will be good enough for most things.
But it depends on the lighting and your ability
it
to
does,
light.
Absolutely, yeah. But the lighting is really key. You need decent lighting and you need to know how to use it. But I don't think education, nobody's been taught to do that in education. Nobody's, from what I can see, the practical skills aren't being taught in education.
But you learned it. You learned it on the job. You learned it as a. Did you learn that in art school? Or?
No, in art school, I was lucky enough to have a brilliant guy, brilliant lecturer, who's he worked in commercial photography for about 10 years. Got out of it for a few different reasons and gone into lecturing. But he was passionate about photography. He understood photography, and he was a really inspirational sort of character. And he pushed you. You know, he made you do things. You know, by sort of mild bullying and by a lot of inspirational sort of help as well. You know, he was a great guy, and I was really lucky, and I got on with him really well. He didn't get on with everyone. He was a bit of a no prisoners sort of Glaswegian, and I got on with him great, and he really formed my career at a really early age. And then of course he said, you've got to go to London, use the phone some people. and he was really good, you know. He hectored you into doing stuff, and I think and it was a really interventionist sort of regime he had. You know, he didn't leave me sort of toddle along and do my own thing. He said, no, you need to do this, and this is what you need to do, you know. And he made me enter. There was a Polaroid was a big thing in those days, and everything was shot. We were shooting everything on large format 5/4 10/8, and Polaroid had a competition, the first ever sort of student competition, and he made me enter it, and I won it, which was a big thing. And so and that made you feel good about it. But yourself, you know, well, actually, I am pretty good at this. And then the Association of Photographers had a students competition, and I came second in that. And they had a work experience scheme, and so he sort of pushed me in that direction. And that link, you know, I wasn't a very resourceful kid. And that link, that push that he gave me, really set me off on the right track. I mean, other people did the same thing and didn't take it any further, but I was fairly determined, and you know, but he really facilitated that for me. He was a good guy. And then of course I met lots of other photographers, and I learned to do things different ways. And you know, you build on your experience, then, don't you? Yeah. But that was the one guy who's still around, who I think I can trace it all back to.
Mm. And how old were you then?
Oh, I was 20.
20.
Yeah, 1920. Yeah. I didn't before then. Before I'd met Bill, his name, I'd never really considered. I didn't even know about commercial photography, advertising photography. I remember seeing someone walking out of a darkroom with a picture of a Hoover. I thought, why would you want to take a picture of a Hoover? And he said, what's a product shot for? I thought, what's a product shot, you know? And he said, well, you know, for catalogues and God knows what. I thought, oh, okay, right. Well, you know, you can make money doing this. Yeah, all right, okay. So that's how I got onto that.
It's interesting you say that, because when I studied graphic design at Glasgow, photography was a module.
Yeah.
And I suspect
it was a module of what I did as well. Yeah.
I suspect it's probably the same across the board, and I loved it. But yeah, I wonder whether there's enough of is the next step there, do you think, in many institutions, for people who see, perhaps around designers, they see photography as an adjunct to the sketchbook. You know, it's another, rather than a sketch, you do some background studies, or you do some photography, and you'll then use that in a piece of design. But you may go off and have to commission a professional photographer to do it. Do you think many designers now are fulfilling their own needs, if you like?
Yeah, they are.
Shooting?
Yeah, sure.
Is that just around accessibility of the kit and the gear?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I mean, you know, it depends what facility they need. You know, I know a lot of photographers shooting their own video. They've got little DSLRs and they shoot some stuff, and it's a bit ropey, it's a bit rough around the edges, but it's fine for what they need. And they do their own photography. I know a couple of art directors who are, creatives who are really good photographers in their own right. But of course, they can't do this. They haven't got a studio. They can't do. You know, there's some things where they have to use me for. But they were quite happy to go and do their own pictures. And you see, you see various degrees of success and failure. You know, some people do it really well, and some people do it horrendously badly. And the best bit is that a lot of people try to shoot their own work. So they put it on a desk in the studio and take pictures of it. And I've seen that done pretty badly.
Digital, analog. Do you still dabble with the analog?
No, my life is too short. I have absolutely no desire to go back to analog at all. And I spent a lot of time shooting in analog, believe me. No interest at all. Just me as a person, I suppose. I'm like, well, it's done. Move on. And I resent it being taught so extensively on photography courses. I think I know some photography courses that don't teach digital at all. Well, they don't. They teach very little sort of vocational anyway. It's all academic. And the world's moved on. And I think it's great. It's a craft, and it's great. And I'm really happy for anybody who loves doing it and the whole thing, because it is a great thing. It was a brilliant thing. I loved the smell of the darkroom and the magic of printing on black and white and seeing the image appearing in front of you and dodging and burning. I loved all of that, but it's moved on, and I just haven't got enough. There's not enough hours in a day to go back to that. Life's much faster for me. So,
but it must have informed who you are.
Of course, yeah.
And the way you work.
Of course, yeah.
And the way you see things.
Yeah, particularly with lighting, because film was much less forgiving than digital. I know that sounds, a lot of people will tell you the opposite.
Yes.
But film, there was a contrast ratio in film, which was set. Piece of film, you can fiddle about the edges with processing or whatever, but film was, you got it right, you got it wrong. If it wasn't right on the film, especially with there was a bit of stuff you could do with black and white, but if you were shooting on tranny, if you were shooting transparency, which we did 90% of the time, transparency had a particular set of features, and if you didn't light for that, if you burn out highlights or your shadows go black or whatever it was, it had its own gamut, and you had to get to know the particular film you were shooting on and light accordingly, and so it made you very disciplined, because you couldn't, in the early days when I was shooting transparency, there wasn't an E6 lab in South Wales, so never has been proper professional lab. So the nearest one was in Bristol. So if we shot something on a Monday, a van would turn up on a Tuesday morning to pick up the film. So you might spend a day on a shoot. You might have models down, and God knows what, it might be a big shoot. And productions tended to be a lot bigger back then. There was more money sloshing about back in the sort of 90s, I suppose. But you do, a lab would come along, pick up the trannies on a Tuesday, take it over to Bristol, process it, bring it back to you Wednesday morning. So everything depended on this, half a dozen sheets of 5:4 film. It had to be right. So you shoot Polaroids. We shot a lot of Polaroid, to get the composition exposure to a degree and whatever. But it made you really disciplined. Everything had to be great. It had to be dead right on the day. And so you take that does inform you as a in a digital age, because you tend to get things. What you got to remember, back in those days, there was no retouching, there was no Photoshop. So if there was dust on your still life, it looked like shit. You just couldn't have it. So, before you pressed the button on the final film, everything was cleaned and blown and brushed and whatever, till it was pristine.
And I guess in those days, there were no curves necessarily either, but you know what they mean now, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can interpret what that means in post-processing.
Yeah, and it does, you take a lot of those skills over into digital. And the one thing I had a big problem with, and I've talked to another photographer who's done the same sort of journey. When you move over from film into digital, and because I did it as a big jump, I didn't do it as a gradual transition. I stopped shooting film, and then 10 years later started shooting digital. I kept feeling I was cheating. So if there was, a bit of dust on the set or on the still life or whatever, I'd want to clean it up. But actually, it would take me much less time to do it in Photoshop. but I wanted, and it's taken me, and it's, I've been back in it now for 8 or 9 years, and I still feel to a degree that I'm cheating if it's not. and also, I feel quite strongly about the retouch as well. I think the best retouching is when it doesn't look like it's being retouched. If something looks retouched, as soon as you see it, it's just fake, and it just no authenticity, and it just looks crap in my opinion. I love great retouching where you just can't see it just looks real, looks right, and that's what that's my own personal sort of mantra.
Do you have a huge archive? Do you keep all your material?
I've got all my black and white stuff that I've shot since. I lost a lot on a studio move, believe me, years and years ago. But I've got pretty much everything I've shot commercially. I lost a lot of personal stuff, frustratingly, from back in the early days. But I've got all my negatives and contact sheets. And I've got selected highlights of commercial stuff that I've done, back in the 80s and 90s. Things I like. I've got my portfolio from then and all sorts of stuff like that.
Do you look back with rose-tinted spectacles, or do you look back on it and say, could have been a lot better?
Yeah, I always think it could be a lot better.
Never satisfied then?
No, never, not really, no. I look at my stuff and go, I look back at, I had cause to bring out an old 5.4 tranny the other day to illustrate a point to a client. They wanted something different and whatever. And I picked out something I'd shot years and years ago. I said, look, we could do something like this. And it was absolutely right for them. They were blown away with it because it was, on the tranny, and they'd never seen a tranny before, really. And they were like, oh, God, And it was quite interesting. But so some of the stuff is okay. Some of the stuff's nice, it's fine. But I'm not really overly impressed by my own stuff. I can always, it's always frustrating. I always think it could be better. I could do a lot better than I do. With everything. It's very, very rarely do I take a picture and go, well, yeah, I'm really happy with that. He's not, doesn't everybody think like that?
Yes. I mean, I can look at pictures and I think I have I've developed a bit of a idiosyncrasy about the way I work, because I do a lot of stuff outside, instant stuff. But I tend to not look at the work straight away. It's a really strange thing. I have to leave it.
And then it's better afterwards.
And it's better afterwards.
Yeah, no, I'm like that. I'm always disappointed the day after, or a bit like deflated.
Yes.
And then a couple of weeks later, 6 months later, you think, it wasn't so bad. Yeah. But you never really,
No, never really.
If you look around, there's no pictures on the wall in the studio. That's because I don't think they're worth putting up on the wall. And I've got my stylist is saying, get a grip, put some pictures on the wall. You've got some wall space, put the pictures up. I'm like, they're not very good. It's pathetic. And she's going, no, use this one, use that one. So the only way out of that is I'm going to say, right, here's the pictures, go and do it for me.
Is there anything about that dissatisfaction with your own work, or, looking back on it, about time? And I guess, are you which projects do you prefer? Do you prefer those long, drawn out, big furniture shoots that go on for weeks, or do you prefer a quick, very intense couple of days on something?
I've no preference, I think.
No. Whichever pays.
Yeah, what I really like, whichever pays, there's a bit of that in it. Now, I really like, my favourite shoots, I think, is when we do, fashion and beauty shoot or whatever, and you do a day shoot, or maybe 2-day shoot, and you get models and makeup artists and stylists and clients and art directors, and you've got a studio full of people, and it's a buzz, and it's great, and it's chaotic, and but those are the best. Those are my favourite days. Knackering, and it's to manage all the people, and to think of all the technical side, and to take the pictures and whatever.
So, would you like to do a video shoot?
Well, yeah. We are going into that. That's this year's sort of. We've shot video in the past,
right?
But we're really gearing up to shoot.
In what sense would you video, as in for products material, or
all?
Right.
We've got 2 product shoots happening within the next 4 weeks. One of which is really, really interesting, really exciting. And then, but I'd like to shoot other people and things like that. And I think that's part of, you were talking about personal work earlier on. Well, that's part of something I want to do personally because I really enjoy it.
So would you like to make a movie?
I don't think I could think of a photographer that wouldn't like to make a movie. That would be an amazing thing. Yeah, but I think I'm not stupid about it. It's as an enormous project.
Yeah.
Then I'd love to do it, but I can't see how that would ever happen.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, so you have an ambition then. There is an ambition lurking in there.
There is. Oh God, yeah. If there was a project that I could hook into or whatever, yeah. I can't see it happening by my motivation, but my own doing.
You can make a movie for me. I'll write it because I got a couple of ideas.
Well, yeah. I mean,
But there would be small ideas. Do you know what I mean?
That's fine.
Because because I think
some of the best ideas are small ideas.
Yes, indeed.
Beautifully done.
Yeah.
I can see that working. I've always been on the edge of video. We've always shot a bit of video, and I've just been shooting some stuff on a DSLR with a full frame and all this sort of stuff. And it's lovely quality. You've got to process it well, but if you process it right, it's lovely. And of course, a lot of the skills that I've honed over the years are completely transferable. You think about the photographers who become really successful directors, and there's a long list.
There is indeed, yes.
Very top guys.
Yeah.
And that's where it comes from. They're transposable skills.
It's the lighting again. It's all about
It's lighting, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Lighting and composition. And then of course you've got to have the intelligence and the so not everyone can do it. I might not be in that category of the people who can't do it, but there's the storytelling side of it and the continuity of it, making sense of something. Because some films are beautifully shot and they're beautifully lit, but they're not very good films.
No substance.
No. You need a bit of depth and a bit of emotional,
So that buzz you were describing earlier that you enjoy of having the stylists, the makeup, assistants.
I love working as part of a team like that.
Right. So let's look at that for a sec then, because that's interesting, isn't it? So this is you with your own studio. You can get on with a lot of your own work.
Yep.
On your own.
Yep.
When you need it, an assistant and a stylist. But that buzz, is there an opportunity there to bring those disparate skills together that probably have the same moaning session themselves, don't they? They probably wax lyrical. I'd love to be working with a photographer. I'd love to be working with a stylist.
Well, I do. I mean, I tend to.
Can you invent that and create something?
Yeah, I mean, I do. Like I had a meeting with a stylist this week. Not this week, last week. Who's had a bit of a loose end, and so we've decided to get together and come up with some ideas and shoot some stuff. And again, this is going back to my personal sort of stuff. So there's no money involved. There's no we'll get a model in and we'll do something. And I do that. I do that anyway. I think the last 2 years I've been so busy, literally flat out for 2 years, not very few spare days, that it squeezed most of the my own personal work has been sidelined. It's been squeezed out of the equation by being so busy, especially with doing these long room set shoots, which could last 3 months, So 3 months of just building and shooting room sets. And of course, there's no room in the studio. You've got no mental space to do it either. It's just exhausting. And so once you've done the 3 months, suddenly you're into loads of little jobs that you've been putting off for that 3 months, and you're playing catch up, and then another room set project will come in and you're off doing that again. And it's been like that for 2 years. That's finished, I think. So that's why the personal thing is something, and I'm probably at a time where I need to do that to re-energize and reinvent and come up with something new. So all the timings work out for me really.
What about collaboration with other photographers?
Well, I'm talking to one guy at the moment who's interesting photographer, stroke retoucher, and we're talking about some sort of collaboration. I'm actually collaborating much more closely with an art director, creative friend. We've got we've got a feeling that there is a segment of high-end creative provision which isn't catered for in Cardiff or in South Wales. And a lot of it is to do with moving image and but high quality art direction and ideas driven work, which nobody seems to offer. There are a lot of sort of totally, I'm talking about in the commercial sense. There are lots of good production houses and people doing very nice things, but there's no one there providing a really high quality creative service across the board in terms of the moving image and stills and top end art direction, and so that's something we're looking at quite closely at the moment. We're doing something which starts this Friday, in fact, to kick that. I can't be more specific. It's a bit of a sort of nebulous sort of idea at the moment.
I suspect we feel the same way about the stills side in photography, which is hence this the whole project kicking off doing the podcasts. But because there is a lot of talent.
Oh, there's loads of talent
in Wales. It just seems very disparate and unconnected. And I mean, how do you think that could change? Both in what you're describing and viewing it from the stills.
One of the problems with is that there is work is thin on the ground, generally, and so people are tempted to keep themselves to themselves. They gather their work into them, and they guard it jealously. They don't sort of so that it stops them communicating with other photographers. I'm talking about photographers in general here, so that you tend to only mix with photographers who can't be a threat to you. They're in a different, which I think is ridiculous. It doesn't happen in other cities and other places where there are little communities of like-minded people, all working in the same field, but who are not so afraid of, And I think that's the pressure of the lack of work and the preciousness of the work. I'm that's all I can put it down to. There are probably half a dozen people doing what I do in Cardiff, thereabouts, with a studio and doing the same sort of stuff. I think I know them, like I know them all. But we never get together, and any attempt you make to get together, it just doesn't happen. The only time it happens is when a big player like Hasselblad or whatever, Broncolor, will come down and do a studio day, and then we'll all go along, and we'll all have a great time. We'll have a chat.
Niceties.
Yeah, it's great, and we have a really nice time. I say some of them used to work for me or whatever. We have a great time, but there's no community. And then,
but I think it's important, hopefully through some of these interviews, for other people to hear photographers saying that about how daft it is.
Yeah,
that we don't ridiculous. Get together more, chat, just even on a social or semi-formally, whether it's an exhibition or some kind of collaboration of sorts. But I think you've got to hear people say that, haven't you?
Yeah.
In a genuine way.
I tell people, anybody who listens, I'll say, come around. I met a couple of photographers, over Christmas, and I'm saying, come to the studio, come down, come and have a chat, come and have a coffee. Just come and, we are pretty like-minded individuals. We do the same job, whichever strand of photography we're involved with. And, some people are completely different. They have different opinions and different outlooks. We still do the same thing. And it's quite interesting to hear what other people have to say about it. I'm all for it. And I always have been. I've never been, I've never been afraid to sort of share. Or in the same token, I'm really keen when an assistant works for me that they have an ambition to become a photographer. So you're sort of breeding your own competition. But I'm all for that. I think that's healthy for the industry, and it'll all come around back to be healthy for me. So, it has worked in the past. Whenever people I've worked with have become photographers, there's a couple of examples. Probably 4 or 5 of my assistants in the past are fully fledged working photographers doing very well for themselves now. I think that's great, and I encourage that. And you, in a way, to be a good assistant, you need to really want to be a photographer. Otherwise, you're just going to be a career assistant, which is no bad thing, I suppose. But it's not really pushing you along much.
photography education, Keith. Torrid subject. Lots of views about how you get into photography as a youngster.
Yeah.
Or an oldster.
Or an oldster,
Yeah,
even,
sure.
yes. What advice would you give to people? I know it's a very open-ended question, but what advice, if people wanted to get into your field specifically, what advice would you give to them? Because you took the traditional route. You went to art college.
That's right.
And then you ended up as an assistant.
Yep.
And then started your own business.
Route, yeah. I do believe in a rounded education, photography education. So I think it's great to know some of the history of photography, where it's come from, you know. So I sort of know where I fit into that history in a way. You know, I go back to like Irving Penn, and when you draw a line, you can come through a whole host of photographers, you know, up to Bailey and Albert Watson and Rankin, who are on that lineage. You know, Nick Knight and people like that, who are very commercial sort of photographers in a way, although they are fantastically creative. But whose technique is great, and who, you know, and sometimes less is more. Most of the time, less is more. And they're brilliant at paring things down to the essential elements.
Yes,
and
indeed,
you find all of these people come from, you know, and it's great to have that broad photography education, so you know, so you've got you know where this stuff is. You know about Northern Light, and you know why this stuff works. It's part of education.
Yes.
And I think that's great. And I think, you know, if you're talking about going on to a degree course and stuff like that, well, yeah, I can see it. And you know, I'm talking very much from a commercial aspect. Whether that's taught or not, I don't know, but I think that would be a great grounding. But whatever you're going to do in photography, it's great to know what's gone on before you and what context you're working in. So there is a case to be made for going and doing a degree course or whatever.
I feel a big but coming on there.
Well, there is a but. There are a few buts. I mean, first of all, how do you choose a degree course? When most people, they might know they want to be a photographer, but they don't know what type of photographer they're going to be. Because they don't know what options they have, necessarily at 18. What do people know about photography, really? I mean, some people, yes, there are the odd, you know, super interested person who's got their life mapped out, perhaps, but that's the rarity. Most people know they like taking pictures, know they're quite good at it, and they'd like to do that. But I'm quite sure whether they're going to be a car photographer or a reportage photographer. They just don't really know, perhaps. So various courses specialise in various things. It's very early to take that plunge, isn't it? And then the biggest but I have is that most of these courses are academic courses, and photography is a vocation. So they teach a lot of academic stuff, but not a lot of the practical stuff. So when I get students on work experience, they don't know one end of a camera from another. It's embarrassing.
That is very embarrassing. How can they turn up and not know one end of
no,
a camera
it's
from another?
true. I mean, obviously I've spoken to educators about this, and they say, well, we leave it to the students to learn that in their own time. You know, that's... Did the student know that when they started on the course? I'm not sure. Did you tell them that? Yeah, you're on your own, by the way. And, you know, I've had people fresh off a degree course with a bit of paper saying they've got a 2-1 in photography, who don't know the fundamentals of making the exposure. They don't know what the main f-stops are. They can't even tell you what the main f-stops are. They couldn't say that, you know, they couldn't recite them from 2 to 8, 4, 5, 6 and so on. They just don't know them. And, you know...
I'm gobsmacked, Keith.
Oh no! It happens to me all the time. It's that is the rule rather than the exception. So, you know, they'll think F9 is normal. You know, that's like an F stop. You know, where yes, it is, but it's not one of your major stops. You know, it's somewhere floating between 8 and 11, isn't it? You know, we know that, but they don't, because they're only they shoot on, a lot of them shoot on automatic, you know, DSLRs. So they do what the DSLR tells them. And if you tell them to shoot on F9, they shoot on F9. They don't really give it a lot of thought.
Yeah, I touched on this with Tim, and I think it was something I've read recently, that The one thing that digital does, it doesn't allow you to keep your mistakes, in the sense that you can erase your mistake.
Right.
And I think that's a little trap that people, and especially young photographers, may fall into, that you do actually learn that you can look at the back of your camera and know, oh, come on, I've made a huge, horrendous mistake there. I've used the wrong aperture or the wrong ISO or whatever. But that's basic stuff, isn't it, really, I suppose?
Well, I think if there's an argument for teaching analog in university, then that's
the discipline of that.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's a term or a couple of terms or whatever it is teaching analog would give you great grounding in understanding and making you more accurate. Because with digital, it can make you really sloppy. Yes. Because it's a bit dark. I'll just boost it up in Lightroom. It's a bit nice. It's a bit this not enough contrast, but I'll give it more contrast. Shadows gone dark. I'll bring up the shadows. That's just a bit lazy, really, and ultimately not quite the same as getting it right in camera. And if you talk to any photographer worth his salt, they'll tell you that getting it right in camera is the key. Then you can do more afterwards if you want. But getting it wrong in the first place, all you're doing is trying to correct the mistakes. And so I think for those institutions that teach analog, then that's a good thing. And just for the greater depth of understanding of the process, that's fine. But you've got to move on then and teach digital, because when you ask people, a lot of students come and they shoot JPEGs, and they know there's something called a raw file, but they're not really sure what it is, because no one's ever taught them.
But this is a huge indictment of the educational system in a way. What you're saying, that a photography student doesn't know when he comes on work experience to your studio, doesn't know one end of the camera from another.
Well, I think it is. I think it's shocking. But when I talk to people in education, they say that's not what we're here for. We are obliged to make it an academic course, and so we have to teach academics. So they essays are the big deal, and it's not about taking pictures. A lot of it is about about the academic side of it.
Have you had any trainees or assistants coming in, or even people on placements, that have expressed that frustration?
Yes. Yeah, I think now that fees are high, people say, hang on a minute, I didn't sign up for this. I don't think they understand when, however well the course is, sold to them in the first place. I don't think they understand that they don't actually take a lot of pictures. I was, and so they start to resent that. Then they start to go, well, I'd really like to know a bit more about this. And a few have said that. A few are oblivious, but some do. I mean, but one of the things they don't take enough pictures. They just don't take enough pictures. So I was talking to one girl, and I always like this case, it was boring, but she was talking about wanting to do some project, and she was going to do it in 3 months' time or whatever, and it was. I remember it being in March because it was my birthday, and we were chatting. I said, "When was the last time you took a picture? When was the last time you actually took a picture?" Expecting it to be sort of last week, And she said, "Oh, it was just before Christmas when I was in an aeroplane going on holiday and took a picture through the window of the aircraft." I was just gobsmacked, because part of wanting to be a photographer is the joy of taking pictures. Yes. So it's like a prerequisite, that you'd love taking pictures. So you need to be taking pictures all the time. Yes. And I always say to anybody who listen, just take the pictures. Don't worry. Don't just go and do it. The more you shoot, the better you'll get at it. Like anything, the more you do it, the better you'll get at it, and the more you'll learn, and the more you'll find your own style. And just take pictures. Where they seem to be bogged down in essays and research and whatever. I say bogged down. That's fine if you want to be. One assistant who wanted to be a curator, and that's fine. Then she's in the right course. But I suspect for everyone who wants to be a curator, there's a handful who want to be a photographer. And so really give them some skills to be a photographer. And the other thing is, you've got people people like us who have this, wealth of knowledge, experience, and contacts, and ability to give people, get people work and whatever. Totally underutilized. They should be banging on our doors 24/7 to get students in here. But I don't think they like what we tell them, so they don't.
Yes, I think that's probably hit the nail right on the head, Keith. I don't think they would like what we tell them. I remember I've had an experience actually talking to students about my work and showing them my work. And I had a room of, I don't know, about 40 students. And I asked them to put up their hand if they took a picture every day. Only 3 hands went up.
That's right, yeah.
And you kind of think, well, what's the point of you being here? I mean, and I extended it. I asked, how many of you take a picture every other day? Just a few hands went up. Every week, a few more hands went up. But out of 40 students, and you start to think, that's not right.
Not if they're photography students.
So, in a way, I mean, we're touching on some dodgy territory here now, but are universities bringing people in just for the money?
Right, that's, I'm not quite sure I'm willing to put my neck on the block on that one. But yeah, they are, of course they are. I mean, I've been involved in, committees that validate courses, and
I've been on 1 or 2 of those as well.
Yeah, and it's all about getting bums on seats and stuff.
I've actually...
and can you blame them, the way it's set up?
No.
Because there are, you have to look at it from the educator's side, and you've got to say, well, we need income. And if we put another course on, we can get more income, which will get more people into photography and blah blah blah. I can see that, but I'm not sure. I don't want to go into specifics, but no, it's not great. I think I know that some courses, some people are setting up courses that are not at their home university, they're off-site at different parts of the country, where they qualify for various grants and whatever. I just think that's not great, is it? That's losing the sight of your objectives, isn't it? You are there then to as just an income generation project, not to teach people something that they can go on to have a career in. I don't hold with that at all. And I think a good course where people were taught by passionate practicing photographers, people who I stand before by my quality, don't I? And if I'm doing some shit stuff, then nobody comes back to me. And I think it's great to be taught by a practicing photographer, because they know how to get you through the maze, and somebody who's passionate about it can really inspire kids, inspire people to and I'm talking about, generally talking about kids here, not people going into it from a different level. So I think that there is a great need for university courses teaching photography. I just don't think that most of the courses I know have got it anywhere near right. Not to produce people who are any good to me at all. They're a waste of time for me. There was a time when 7 or 8 years ago, when I was really keen on getting people in on work experience, because I think because I want to make contact with people, I can help them do stuff. It's a win-win thing. It should be, But they were so dreary. The people that were coming through the door, they were so hopeless, and they were so underskilled and not enthused and whatever. I just felt it was my job was to get under their skin and give them a bit of a lift. Say, come on, you can do this. And some of them were very talented, but sort of aimless and wandering about. And it just became, in the end, such a desperate thing. I just stopped doing it because it was just pointless. So that is the traditional way in through education. But you know, if one of my kids wanted to be a photographer, then the first thing I do is say, well, don't bother with a university course. You're wasting your time. Go and work for this guy. You know, go and make contacts. Go and do whatever you can do. Pay him the £9,000 for a year, and you'll that year you'll learn 10 times more than you would.
I wonder whether it would end up costing £9,000 a year.
Well, you know,
I mean, have you considered running any lighting?
We've
courses?
talked about it.
I think that would be
back
great.
about 4 or 5 years ago. I used to have quiet summers. I used to do work would dry up in sort of early July till sort of mid-September, and so we did have a notion of sort of running some courses, whether it was on processing raw files, that sort of technical sort of post-production sort of side, or whether it was on simple lighting and stuff like that. I think it takes a lot of organising, and it takes a lot of work to get these things up, and a lot of money really if you want to get it set up properly where people have got their own. I don't know. We thought about setting it up with workstations and whatever, getting people in for a weekend or a long weekend or a week or whatever. And I don't think ultimately it was economically a goer. And as most of my stuff is driven by making money, then it didn't really make us enough money. But yeah, I think there's a gap there where photographers who know their stuff, and there's plenty of them around, could take kids under their wing and they would learn so much. And that was the system. You went to university, then you went to work as an assistant, which was like an apprenticeship, and then you became a photographer by hook or by crook. I think you could skip the university thing. You can, as long as you've got a photographer who would encourage you to find out about various bits of the academics part, the history of photography, and the broader field that you're working in. You end up becoming a photographer much quicker and with a lot more skill.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff I do now, I find I take inspiration from other photographers.
Of course, all the time.
All the time, yeah. And it's the telling story aspect I enjoy of photography, and being able to find those in quite quick situations, because even though I'm sort of past my middle age, really.
That word dinosaur springs.
Yeah. But I'm still quick thinking in the sense that I can see the pictures I want to take, and I know that particular shot will tell exactly the story I want to tell.
Yeah.
And I suppose that's an instinctive sort of thing as well. You don't actually learn that sort of thing, do you?
Did you have that from day one?
To an extent, yes.
Yeah.
But it's kind of developed now. It's
better,
more refined.
doesn't it? Yes,
it's more refined.
Becomes refined, yeah.
And learning from other photographers, and learning, it's kind of learning to stand still sometimes.
Right, yeah, sure. Yeah.
And because
things are moving so fast.
and everything is moving so fast, and people I've noticed, I was doing the Je suis Charlie thing down on the bay, and I was there and I just stood still because the pictures were coming to me.
Right.
Almost. I didn't go hunting, really.
Yeah.
But there were other photographers zooming around all over the place,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you think, well, stand still for a little bit, have a look, see what happens.
But of course, if you had somebody shadowing you for a month or 6 weeks or whatever, they would see this. They could learn from this, and it's a real shortcut to gaining a lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
Just watching how you work.
Yeah, and learning how to speak to people as well.
There's loads in that. Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
I'm sure when you're dealing with clients, there's a specific way you deal with clients or with an art director. You have that knowledge, you have that rapport with people.
Yeah, there's another problem as well. Having a rapport and getting on with people is key to the job. Yeah. Sometimes you're spending a couple of days in the studio, with a bit of music on in the background, but you're just talking to that person for 3 or 4 days, and you have to get on with them. And the other problem I've always faced anyway, I don't know, we're talking about being dinosaurs, is that the one thing you've got to avoid, you're dealing with an art director who's 20 years younger than you, with, less experience perhaps, and you cannot be patronising
No.
or condescending, or you have to really steer away from it. When they come up with something, you have to have heard it for the first time. And it has to be, that's a brilliant idea, even though you know it's not going to work because you've done it 1,000 times before. You can't say, don't be a prick, that's not going to work. You can't do it. You've just got to, and I found myself being led on wild goose chases not to upset the ego of the art director I'm working with. So they say, can we try this, can we try that? Yes, of course we can try it. But you've done it 1,000 times before. But you've never done it with that person, so you never know. Something might happen, so you go along, but really you know that that's not going to work.
Yeah, but when you're dealing with models, etc., or the private work you want to do yourself,
Yes.
you were talking about wanting to do more portraiture and stuff.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
But that sort of that link with that person,
That's essential.
It's so important.
It is, absolutely. Until you bond with that person, you're not going to get your best picture.
Spot on.
You and when it happens, it's a magical moment. When you're in the same zone,
Yes.
just the pictures just flow. But that's whether you're working with anybody off the street, or whether you're working with a professional actor, model, whatever, you still have to get in that zone. You have to get under their skin. They have to trust you, and they have to have a rapport with you. And you don't always get it. No. I've worked with some people who will not let you in.
No.
Usually MDs of big companies, or chief execs who are far too important to be here, and they've only got 4 minutes. And that's very difficult, and the skill is getting a picture out of that. And, you do your best. And usually I do it by being really cheeky to them, really. I'm pushing them out of their comfort zone. Because they're used to everybody really, doffing the cap and all this sort of stuff. And if you're really rude to them, not rude to them, but, cheekily rude, they are really, they're not quite sure how to deal with that. And they start to have to take, and if you really put them down in front of their sort of minions, you're not taking it, They're really not, that's great, it's a great technique, because they suddenly rattled, and they have to engage with you because you've taken the piss. And so it's you learn lots of tricks like that. And I've got great pictures out of that by really sort of, getting under their skin. And then they give you something that you wouldn't have got otherwise.
Yeah, there's a lovely story about Bailey. He was photographing somebody quite important, some sort of minister or something, and he wasn't getting what he wanted. So he slapped him across and took the photograph, but he got the photograph that he wanted.
Yeah, I tried to do a verbal slap.
Well, thank you very much for the verbal slap. It's excellent stuff.
But it does work. It does work.
Yeah. Have you ever kept a journal?
Have I ever kept a journal? No. I'm just not disciplined enough. I'm not...
Would you advocate for young photographers to keep journals or sketchbooks or...
Oh, definitely. I mean, I'd advocate it. I think it's really useful. I mean, I keep... my pictures are a journal of sorts, but I don't go out of my way to do that, I'm not someone who records every bit of my life or in pictures or anything like that,
Are all your lighting plans in your head?
I don't have a lighting plan.
You don't.
I don't have one.
You don't have one.
I don't. The one doesn't exist.
Right. Okay.
I don't have. There's. I'm shooting some jewellery at the moment in the studio, and that is. It's for a specific client. It's a repeat job I do all the time, and that has a particular setup that I know and I can recreate. But it's not a. It's not a plan as such. If I'm photographing a person, if I'm doing a portrait, I don't know how I'm going to do it until I do it.
Yeah,
I'll just go,
so
look at that person. I think we'll do this. But I don't have like a, the sort of interview lighting with a key light and a thing. I just never think like that. Never ever think like that at all.
So it's on the hoof.
It's on the hoof, yeah, definitely. And I quite enjoyed that. Sometimes I'll set something up. We'll have a model in the studio, whatever it is, and I'll spend an hour setting something up, and I'll shoot a few frames. And I just don't like it, and I'll start again. I'll take it all down again, and we'll just change it all and do something different. And just it costs you an hour, but I don't have lighting plans, and that's the problem with teaching somebody lighting. If you look on YouTube, somebody will 5 different lighting plans to get you out of every situation. It's just rubbish, I mean, it's like I really like backlighting and 3/4 backlighting and stuff like that. And most of my products start off being backlit. And one of the things I tell students who are with me or assistants, look, don't light something from the front. Don't be so stupid. And they go, why? Because you want to put light on it. You say, well, yes, but you explain why you're lighting it from the back and how you fill it and how you model the subject and whatever. But that's just a rule of thumb, and sometimes I'll think I'll break that rule just to do something different, and I'll put 2 big flash heads at the front just to change it, so it looks. So I think lighting is all about feel and about what you feel like doing on the day in a way.
But you keep a blog, but you don't tend to go into your thoughts and your processes, do you?
No, I keep a blog as a purely sort of. I keep it for all the wrong reasons.
It's not personal then, it's commercial.
No, it's not as commercial.
Because you have a tab on your website saying blog.
Yeah, and for all,
Because I loved the Spanish stuff you did with your little Fuji.
Well, the Spanish stuff is much more my personal stuff, and that's had a great response, and I've got work out of people saying, I just want it like that.
Wow.
I want something like that, and that sort of. They're very heavily processed to get a certain look, and so people go, I love that, and that's been really, really successful. But that happened, that whole little shoot. We were in Barcelona and we did that stuff, and it happened on the cusp of a really busy couple of year period. And it sort of squeezed the life out of me, really. I wanted to do more of that stuff, and then you just get so busy that you just don't have the time or then the inclination, and so I need to get over that and beyond it, really, which is hopefully where I am now.
So you mentioned earlier that you would like this year to do more personal.
Yeah, definitely.
Take a bit of time.
I've got stuff booked in to do. I've actually allocated time where I'm not going to try and earn money, and I'm going to try and do the personal stuff. And I've got a collaborative project we're starting on Friday. I've got another collaboration, one with a designer, one with a stylist, and I'm going to do some stuff for myself as well. And I think it is important. Having not done it to any degree for the last 2 years, although I've kept shooting stuff for myself, I haven't really shot anything with any depth to it. So it is important I get back to that and start shooting some stuff, because that stuff feeds your commercial work. You discover things and learn
experimentation.
Things. Of course, it's experimentation. Yeah,
it would be interesting to see you being more reflective. Then,
yeah,
in terms of describe words accompanying
yes,
the images.
Yeah,
more because
I'm not sure if
you're an interesting bloke, and the images
shallow?
you take. No, not at all. I think you're very deep. Okay. But it would be interesting to see
commercial photography is quite shallow, isn't it? It is quite shallow. We're working for money. Somebody comes along, asks us to take a picture of that.
And for that reason, I
whatever.
think your blog could be very interesting to see you take a pause.
It probably could.
And describe what it is you're doing.
It
and
probably
why.
could be. Yeah, maybe that's something I should think about.
What would be the key attributes that you would like to see coming in from someone fresh out of the education system or wanting to be an assistant?
I think the first thing is they it really helps if they know what they want to do. So that gives them a focus. So they can put a dot in the future and say, I'm aiming for that goal there. I want to be a photographer. I don't care what it is, what type of photographer they want to be, as long as they know where they want to go. And then I can understand them and help them and get them along that path. Okay, they might not know exactly what they want to be, but they need to have some sort of idea of where they want to go. They need to have skills. And I'm not talking about... I think it's very difficult to teach people a lot of the more, nuanced sort of skills, especially in lighting and stuff like that. You can teach them the basics, some very straightforward stuff. But they need to have camera skills and software skills and a fairly basic skill set, really. Nothing too special, nothing too amazing. Just so they can open files in Photoshop and they can retouch them. They know what all the tools do, and you can teach them the rest. And then they know what a raw file is and why we're shooting a raw file, and they know that you need to calibrate your monitor and why you need to calibrate your monitor. If you want your picture brighter, you just turn up the brightness control on your monitor. Why that doesn't work. They need some very basic knowledge like that, and I feel that's what they don't have. And then they need, this more sort of helicopter view of photography in a broader sense about, photography and photographers and the history of it and where it is now and where it's going. Yeah, definitely. We all need that. They need to have people that they inspire them. So they need a good broad base and a real keen interest in photography. I'm interested in photography, whether it's art photography or whether it's commercial photography or anything in between. If people are taking pictures, I'm interested in them. And some of it I think is rubbish. Some of it I don't like, but that's okay. Somebody else might like it. It's not. It's just my judgment. But I'm still interested in it. And everything should be on table. If you're a photographer, you should be able to go anywhere you want within or without of the genres. And you need that curiosity as well. People need it coming out of university. They need that curiosity to explore, and find themselves and find ways forward. I don't think many of them have that at all, and that's partly because they're not inspired to do it. They've just come out of writing 32 essays, or whatever it is, and they're a little bit sort of blunted, which is a bit of a shame. I'm sure they went in wanting to be a photographer, and they've come out not so sure. That can't be a good way to go, can it?